My infertile wife arranged for a stork to deliver a baby to our home. I wish that were the punchline to some terrible joke. But if you live in our house for the past 18 months, you know better than to question Ella's sincerity. Nothing is funny to her anymore. My wife used to be a joker. That was before we spent a year and a half unsuccessfully trying to conceive a child. Back then, she wore irony like a jumpsuit, a defensive article so well fastened to her body, she would have been unable to remove it in a hurry. But Ella lost that side of herself after months of failed attempts at conception. I wanted the two of us to take fertility tests earlier this year, but it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that she agreed. The results were bad for both fronts. My swimmers were few in number, and Ella's estrogen levels were rather low. Treatment were mentioned, but my wife was too distraught to discuss that, so the doctor simply suggested we keep trying. Ella had already been far from her chirpy self for months, but she became twice as reserved over the following fortnight. Her spell was only broken on Saturday morning, around 3 o'clock, when the two of us were stirred from our sleep by a rapping on the bedroom window. Or maybe I was stirred by the ecstatic gasps Ella let out. "What's that noise?" I asked as the knocking persisted. I rubbed my eyes as my wife eagerly bounded out of bed and rushed towards the window. She tore open the drapes and invited street light into the room. "It's here," she whispered, half awake, with my eyesight and brain both woolly. I saw something absurd perching on that wooden ledge. Two things, I would say. A baby swaddled in pristine white fabric, and whiter still, a stork. The bird sat with its blood-red legs tucked under its large white feathers, watching with black eyes of unnerving intellect as Ella opened the window and scooped the sleeping baby from its resting position on the ledge. "Thank you," my wife said to the animal. Meanwhile, I hadn't managed to say the thing. I was dumbfounded into silence. I suppose because there was a fucking stork on the windowsill. A fucking stork that had, more nonsensically still, brought us a newborn babe in a cotton burrito wrapped to our suburban house at 3:17 a.m. And as the bird brandished its impressive wingspan, elongating its slender legs as it did, my jaw dropped, perhaps in preparation for me to finally utter something important to my wife. Ella shut the window and cradled the mysterious child as its mysterious delivery bird took flight, slipping into the dark. "What the hell is happening, Ella?" seemed as appropriate as a starting question as any. She replied without taking her eyes off the child in her arms. "I did something, Philip." I didn't like that response. "What did you do? Whose child is that?" "Ours." Then my wife, who had been despondent for 18 months, giggled contentedly. Tears dropped ran the length of her face, wrapping around her chin and meeting her neck. I hadn't seen her joyful in a long while, and I'd never seen her that tearful. As I mentioned at the beginning of this post, I didn't question the legitimacy of the scenario for even a second. My wife wasn't pranking me. She wasn't joking around. She wasn't capable of that, after having been so broken for so long. Given it was all real, then I was more terrified than I had ever been. "Ella, I don't understand. Where did that child?" I began, not knowing what words to choose. "Originate?" A silly word perhaps, but I knew the newborn hadn't originated from us. Obviously, you might say, but nothing seemed obvious to me anymore. Not after what Ella and I experienced this weekend. "Originate?" she said. Well, from the stork, of course. I sighed. Ella, the stork brought us a child. You saw it with your own eyes. I don't know what I saw. Okay, she said absently, still not looking away from the thing in her arms. I hated thinking of the child that way, as a thing. But this whole ordeal felt unnatural. Super unnatural. Why? Call it a gut instinct, even if that makes your eyes roll, but I'm not some Fruit Loop. Until that day, I never learned one way or the other when it comes to superstitions or paranormal phenomena. That morning, however, I felt the tingle of some sense I hadn't previously known I even possessed. This was very bad, and not the wife has brought me the child from the black market bad. I got out from under the duvet and trotted delicately over to my wife, opting to take the gentler approach. I placed my hands over hers and rocked the baby with her. She looked at me, finally, and smiled. I'd earned her attention. Ella, I need you to tell me exactly what you meant when you said you did something. She leaned forward and planted a kiss on my cheek. Isn't it obvious? I found a way for us to have a child, Philip. The stork brought us a gift from the heavens. Ridiculous. Sure, I'd heard the myths of storks carrying bundle babies in their beaks. Myths. But now, I wonder whether myths have some root in truth. Maybe those old stories about the storks and the babies came from something real. Sweetheart, I said, that stork and this baby did not come from the heavens. Please just be straight with me. Why and how are they really here? What did you do? Ella's mouth dropped a little, and she looked hurt. Screw you, Philip. Screw me? I scoffed. I wake up at 3 in the morning to find a baby on our windowsill. And I'm the arsehole in this situation? For crying out loud, Ella, just tell me what. The receptionist! Ella screamed in my face before taking a breath and continuing quietly. When we were leaving the clinic last week and you were still talking to Dr. Harper, the receptionist consoled me. She told me a number to call. What do you mean? I asked. What number? Ella ignored me. I called it. Then I waited 11 days, like the man said. Waited for our ripe child. Ripe. I didn't like the way that clunky and oddly chosen word had been wedged into her last sentence. The man? I asked. Ella, you're being so cryptic. Please, help me out here. I waited 11 days, and that brings us to this morning. A white-winged angel delivered this gorgeous boy to us. A boy of our own. Just what we've been killing ourselves to create for nearly 2 years. We've earned this, Philip. We've worked hard enough for this, haven't we? Haven't we? I don't know why I gave out at that moment. I think my brain broke completely. I think we need to sleep now, I whispered, walking over to the window. Ella nodded and smiled again. Yeah, I suppose I should put little Adam down into the cot. When I'm really thinking about it, I'm quite sure I believe sleep will fix everything. That I wake up to find this had all been a dream. Because how could it possibly be real? I will wake up to find nothing in the guest room's cot. The preemptive and rather distasteful, as far as I was concerned, hand-me-down from Ella's mother. I closed the drapes in one swift motion, but my heart shriveled and tightened in fear, greater fear that had been induced by even the revelation of the stork or the baby on the windowsill. I processed what I had seen for that split second. A man standing on the other side of the street. He had been looking up at our window. When I opened curtains again to get a second look, he was gone. Of course he was gone, But that was a blessing from my perspective, as it only helped me to dismiss the whole thing as sleep-deprived madness. Just a bizarre dream born on your heartbreak in this complicated time. You're grieving the child you and Ella are able to conceive. That's all. You'll see when you wake up, and then you'll book a therapist because, let's be honest, this is the most lucid nightmare of your life. But that inner pep talk didn't change the truth. I woke to find Ella scurrying about the house with Adam nestling in the nook of her arm, and I followed her about like a ghost, blinking repeatedly, trying to blink the baby out of existence, perhaps. Everything I experienced that day went in one ear and out the other. Baby monitors, and baby proofing, and baby this, and baby that. But I'm not some shithead of a husband. I was just reeling from the horror of it all. A baby had materialized out of thin air in the middle of the night. Oh no, I'm sorry. A stork brought it, which means the man was real too, was the next frightening thought. My gut lurched, and I spent most of Saturday staring out of windows at our empty street. And the daylight vanished quickly on that short winter day, so I was left staring out into the black, fighting to discern shapes moving between the glow and of the street lamps. My heart didn't loosen. I don't think it had loosened since Adam arrived. "Philip," said Ella at the end of the day, "I'm going to need you to help me out more tomorrow." I frowned at my wife, who was once so sharp-minded. "What the hell is wrong with you? I know you've not been yourself for a long time, but this isn't that. Now you're barely acting human. Never mind acting like Ella. A stork delivered a baby to our window. We know nothing about this child. We know nothing about that man in the street. And I know you felt that tightness in your chest, just like I do. The warning that someone unearthly is afoot. That we need to get out of here right now." That was a speech I should have given Ella. "Sorry," I replied instead. I know my behavior seemed strange, but I was in shock. Have you ever experienced an existential horror that forced you to question your very understanding of reality? It does something to you, your brain, your entire sense of being. In my case, I was left a husk. I went to bed that night hoping, once again, I would wake up to find none of it had been real. Then I woke up at 2:03 a.m. in a sweat. I did, for perhaps as many 3 or 4 seconds, believed just that, it was a terrible dream after all, and I'm awake now. But the crackle from the Bobby monitor grounded me. Adam was crying, and I felt like crying with him as I headed down the corridor. I entered the guest room to find baby wriggling about in his coat, bawling and slobbering, and snorting all over himself. "Hush, baby," I cooed, picking up our child for the first time. He settled immediately. I had hoped holding him might change things, might warm my heart, might make me decide that it didn't matter where the baby has originated. It didn't matter how he had come into our possession. It didn't matter whether the stork has been responsible or has simply been a decorative part of an elaborate delivery orchestrated by that mysterious figure in the street. But holding the baby made everything worse. My fingers never had felt so frozen, not figuratively, but quite literally frozen, for the baby was ice cold to touch. Worse yet, Adam looked at me with a face like no other. Again, I'm not being a shithead. I have nephews and nieces in abundance, and I've seen and held newborns before. I knew they all look different, but this just wasn't right. I've never seen a baby's face quite like this. Never seen a human's face quite like his. Adam wasn't safe. That was all I thought as he smiled up at me, in a manner too knowing, in a manner unthinkably sinister. His little fingers curled around one of mine, striking me with terror so pointed and piercing that I thought my heart might give out there and then. I've been right all along. This baby was a thing. Just as I about to put Adam back into the cot and flee the house, grabbing Ella in process, I was glued to the spot by a sound. A creak from the wardrobe on the other side of the room. My hand at long last warm up, becoming clammy as I faced the now ajar door of the closet to find darkness. My imagination had conjured out all sorts of horrors staring back at me through the crack, so I let out a sigh of relief and laid Adam back down. I even tried to settle my gut by telling myself the baby was perfectly ordinary, that it was only the situation which was unordinary. Of course, no matter what my wife had agreed with the stranger on the phone, I imagined there could be no legal or ethical explanation for how she acquired Adam. Still, he was just a baby, I told myself. It had to be. It happened as I was distracted by his cherub face. The door to the wardrobe swung open, and by the time I had clocked the shape moving towards me, it was already upon me. He was upon me. That man, face masked by the shade of the unlit room with drapes drawn close. I screamed as he pinned me to the ground, elbow flattening my windpipe, and the world faded as he spoke to me in a tone full of greed. You're not the father he needs. You see too much of him, don't you? You see then. He isn't ripe yet. The black outline of my vision pushed inwards, stealing away the world. I thought of Ella and even baby Adam. My greatest fright was that once my life has been extinguished, there would be next. At the edge of blackness, there came tremendous noise, a screech, footsteps against the floor, and scuffle. Then an agitated voice. I felt the force leave from my windpipe, and I could breathe properly again. Philip! Ella cried as she turned on the light. My eyesight readjusted as Ella reached over the cot to scoop up Adam, and I sat upright to get a look at the body of my attacker. He lay unmoving in a pool of blood, knife handle jutting from one temple. I don't know how my wife overpowered him. I don't know anything after this weekend. Ella and I spent most of Sunday talking to police investigators, explaining that my wife had killed the intruder in self-defense. What I find strangest was that the detectives have no questions about the baby at the heart of this break-in and murder attempt. The baby who I was sure would not show up in any official records. I was doubly sure Ella and I wouldn't be listed as his parents. They should have had questions. That's what I keep thinking. That and something one of the officers said with a wry smile before leaving our home. Goodbye, Adam, you ripe little thing. This story operates as a psychological horror with supernatural elements, using the desperate desire for parenthood as a gateway to explore themes of deal-making with unknowable forces and the erosion of reality itself. The story as a corrupted mythology. The story weaponized the innocent childhood mystery of storks delivering babies, transforming it into something sinister. The opening nine's ironic tone, wishing this was the punchline to some terrible joke, immediately establishes that the familiar symbol has been twisted into something genuinely disturbing. The shark itself is described with unsettling precision. Blood-red lakes, black eyes of unnerving intellect, appearing at 3:70 a.m. This is mythology filtered through nightmare logic. The narrator's acknowledgement that maybe those old stories about the storks and the babies came from something real suggests a world where folklore masks darker truths, where children's tales are sanitized versions of genuinely horrific practices. The price of desperation. Ella's 18-month descent from humor and irony into hollow desperation creates the emotional foundation. Her transformation from someone who wore irony like a jumpsuit to someone incapable of jokes mirrors her willingness to make increasingly questionable choices. The story examines how grief and longing can override judgment and even basic survival instincts. The receptionist at the fertility clinic becomes the story's devil figure, offering a phone number, a mysterious contact, an alternative solution when medical science has failed. This echoes classic deal with the devil narratives, but the specifics remain deliberately vague, increasing the dread. The word ripe. The story's most chilling element is the repeated use of ripe to describe the baby. Ella uses it almost unconsciously. Waited for our ripe child. The intruder says he isn't ripe yet. The police officers print parting words. You're right, little thing. Ripe suggests produce, harvest, consumption. It transforms baby Adam from a child into a commodity, or worse, something being cultivated for a specific purpose. The word choice is so alien to how we discuss infants that it creates immediate wrongness. What does it mean for a baby to become ripe? And what happens when the ripening process is complete? Philip's instinctive horror. The narrator's gut-level revulsion provides the story's emotional anchor. While Ella is blinded by joy and fulfillment, Philip experiences what he describes as the tingle of some sense I hadn't previously known I even possessed. His physical reactions are visceral. The baby is literally ice cold. Its smile is unthinkably sinister. Its face isn't quite human. This creates effective dramatic tension. We trust Philip's horror more than Ella's joy because his reactions are involuntary and physical, not emotional or wistful. His repeated assertion that I'm not some Fruit Loop and his previous skepticism about the paranormal lend credibility to his terror. The intruder and institutional complicity. The man lurking in the street and hiding in the wardrobe represents the human infrastructure behind whatever supernatural transaction has occurred. His words before attempting to murder Philip are revealing. You're not the father he needs. You see too much of him, don't you? Philip's ability to perceive Adam's true nature, whatever that nature is, marks him for elimination. The ideal parents in this arrangement will be like Ella, so consumed by need that they accept without questioning. The story's most disturbing implication comes in the final paragraphs. The police have no questions about Adam's origins or legal status. They don't ask for birth certificates or medical records. One officer even uses the word ripe before leaving. This suggests the arrangement isn't underground or at all. It's institutionally sanctioned, with law enforcement either complicit or deliberately ignorant. Unanswered question as horror. The story's powers lie in what it refuses to explain. What is Adam, really? What will happen when he becomes fully ripe? What was the nature of Ella's agreement? Why does this system, medical, legal, social, seem designed to facilitate this? How many other couples have made similar arrangements? The ambiguity serves the horror better than any concrete revelation could. The reader is left with the nightmare of institutional conspiracy, of parenthood as unwitting participation in something monstrous, of love as a vulnerability to be exploited. Ella's transformation. Most tragically, Ella has been fundamentally changed. She killed a man, stabbed him through the temple, yet the story glosses over this with shocking casualness. I don't know how my wife overpowered him. Her capacity for violence, her complete acceptance of the unnatural situation, Her use of language that doesn't sound quite like human. Ripe child. All suggests she's already been altered by the arrangement she made. The woman who once wore irony as armor is gone. In her place is someone who can hold an inhuman thing and call it her son, who can commit murder and return to motherhood without apparent psychological distress. This story succeeds by grounding cosmic horror in the deeply human fear of infertility and the lengths people will go to become parents. It suggests that desperation creates vulnerability, and that vulnerability can be exploited by forces, human, institutional, or supernatural, that we cannot comprehend or resist. The final image of the family unit intact, with Philip alive but aware, knowing his child is something wrong, that the authorities are in on it, create claustrophobic dread. There's no escape, no revelation, no resolution. Only the terrible knowledge that they are trapped in an arrangement that never fully understood, raising something that's waiting to ripen.